You are my missing piece. See? We fit perfectly.
Hello! So quickly I just want to mention before we get started that this tutorial isn't solely based off of Saw, which yes it obviously is, but it's also heavily inspired by Mykie's tutorial from Glam and Gore, and if you'd like to watch that I will link it in the description box down below. The main difference of this versus that one will be apparent as you're watching this tutorial whether or not you've actually seen hers. Now let's get on with it. Firstly, starting off with either freehanding or printing out a puzzle piece onto paper, I actually drew out two options to give myself a choice, but I ended up going with the one to the left as it more resembled the piece cut from this man's face. So let the games begin. I'm putting the puzzle piece drawing on top of a frosted cutting board, and you can put this onto any surface you'd like, but I had two of these handy, so that's what I did. And once I've taped down it to render it immobile, I put the second cutting board on top so that I could actually start off with the prosthetic. I started out with some clay. This is non-drying clay. Well, it does dry, but very slowly. Like, it would take days. Like, literal days. I got this from my local dollar store, and it's the kind that kids can play around with for a long time. Bet the creators didn't know it would be used for this, though. But basically, I'm just going to be using it to create a negative of my puzzle piece. Essentially, just a border around it so we can actually make the prosthetic. I'm using a tool that I have no actual idea of the actual purpose it's used for originally, but I'm using it to clean up the inner edges. Once I feel content with that, I'm heating up some SFX Gelatin. This particular one is 1 part gelatin, 1 part glycerin, and 1.5 parts water. Mixing them together and putting them in the microwave for 15-second intervals until it looks something like this. And to make this process even easier in the long run, I'm adding some mineral powder close to the color of my skin tone to this, but foundation would probably be a better alternative, and you will see why in the end. Now just pour your mixture into the mold you've created and be sure to make it so all the edges are touching all of the edges of the clay. Then leave it to set. I think I left mine for about 20 to 30 minutes and that was solid, literally and metaphorically. I'm continuing to use that multiple use tool of mine to lift up the edges and carefully pull it out. And you've got yourself a creepy flesh looking puzzle piece. Heading to our face portion for this tutorial, I already have my makeup done for this, so if you want to see the tutorial, it will be in the description below as well. As Mykie did just as well, you're going to want to add some red paint to the back of this, partially so you can have a base for your blood effect, and also so you can use it as a stamp so you have the exact shape where you want it to build from, basically. I'm using a red water activated paint because it's super beginner friendly, and you can also use cream paints as well for this, but those aren't going to dry down unless you actually set it with a translucent powder or an eyeshadow of that color, whereas water activated paints actually set pretty nicely. Now stamp that ish onto your face. And you've got the perfect starting for the next portion, which is going to be to make some homemade latex paste. Mykie used a product called Third Degree, aka silicone. However, because of its negative aspects, such as it's very, very hard to work with sometimes, its working time is also very stressful and it's not available to the majority of people. Well, for all those reasons is why it scares the shit out of me, basically. So I'm opting for this option. And for this, you're just going to pour in a bunch of liquid latex into a bowl and slowly add flour, literally like baking flour, to the mixture until you've got a paste like this, and we're ready to apply. Again, using that multi-use tool, which, again, I have zero idea what it's actually supposed to be used for. I'm going to be adding the latex paste around the so-called wound stamp we've created. And tapering the edges away from the stamp in a minute, I'm going to be using some more liquid latex for that on my finger to better smooth out the edges. Adding a bit more to those same areas to almost make peaks of skin and continuing to smooth. You'll know this step is done and it's time to move on when your liquid latex has went from this to a yellow tone, and it will also be dry to the touch. At this time, you'll want to either take a concealer or a foundation of your choosing and put that all over your skin portion of this. Obviously, to make it match your skin better and blend it out, first I use my finger and then a detailing brush to get into all the crevices. to add some bruising tones, because you know that if some skin was just cut from your girl's face, it might have left some bruising depending on if she was dead or not during the cutting process. So I'm taking some pink and purple shades and adding that for some bruising and irritation around the cut. Although we have the basic stamped on shape, I didn't think it was red enough, so I'm using some more red water activated paint and coloring it in, which might make the first stamp shape seem initially useless, but it definitely helped out with the fake skin portion in the long run. And to add even more gore to this, I'm using some Scab blood. Well, a knockoff version, but it's still generally the same idea. I'm also adding that to the back of the gelatin prosthetic.
Alright, so just like the character Two-Face, this prosthetic has two sides to it. One of them is a super bloody side, and the other one is more of a skin tone side. Now, if you guys didn't put any mineral powder that kind of matches your foundation color or your skin color, or you didn't put any foundation in the mixture of gelatin, then you're going to want to paint this side of it with a foundation to match your skin. But an easier way that I found is to put the foundation or the mineral powder that matches you in with the mixture of gelatin, so it's more of like a skin tone versus like a foundation. It's a lot more like skin and less like somebody cut a piece of you out while you're wearing foundation. And there we go.